Hello, 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 and welcome to episode 70 of the Mo Money Podcast. I am your host, Jessica Morehouse. Thank you for joining me for another episode. I'm excited you're here. I missed you. It's been a whole week without you, and I didn't like it. So I'm back with another fresh episode with the fabulous Erin Bury as my guest. In case you don't know, I don't know how, because she's all on the Twitter, so you may have seen her name around, but she is the managing director at 88 Creative, a Toronto-based creative communications agency. But beyond that, she is also a writer for the Financial Post. She has a monthly column there. She's a tech commentator on CTV News and News Talk 1010. Oh my gosh, the list of credits goes on and on. But I would say my personal favorite is she was retweeted by Oprah not once, but twice. Now that's kind of, goals, right? Hashtag goals right there. So me and Erin chit chat about her, going to school, student loans, figuring out personal finance, and then rocking the business marketing world here in Toronto. So you were in for a treat. But before I get to that interview, thanks to Just Wealth for supporting this episode of the Mo Money Podcast. In case you don't know, Just Wealth is Canada's most comprehensive online investment platform. And make sure to visit justwealth.com/Jessica-Morehouse for a special $50 bonus when you sign up for an account. Just Wealth, investing the way it should be, just for you. Now let's get to that interview, shall we? Thank you, Erin, for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm a regular listener, so I'm very excited to be a guest on today's episode.
Ooh, a guest and a fan.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, no, I'm excited. I'm a fan of yours too. I saw you speak at the Canadian Personal Finance Conference last year, and you were awesome. So this is kind of the best episode yet.
Well, I'd like to think so. I'd like to think it's better than Preet Banerjee's episode. So there you
go. Preet who? He's old news.
I know. We'll tweet him to call him out in this episode.
Yeah, I definitely will. So first, I want to kind of jump in. Like, the reason I really wanted to talk to you is you're very successful. You have an amazing career. You're doing so many awesome things that I aspire to at a very young age. So I think we could all learn a lot from what you've done in your career. But I kind of want to let's start from the beginning, learn a bit about you. I feel like people that, are entrepreneurial or, eventually go on to own a small business, they must be good at managing their money, like at the beginning, or, it's just something in them that they just know how to do it. Was that kind of your route, or?
Definitely not. First of all, I think, there's always this question of, are entrepreneurial people born, or do they become that way? And I definitely wasn't born entrepreneurial. My parents both, my dad was a small town community newspaper reporter. My mom worked at Nortel in marketing. So they both kind of worked for big corporations. And I didn't really know that entrepreneurialism or being a small business owner was even a career avenue that you could take.
Yeah, me neither.
I know. And my mom also worked at Nortel at the time when its stock price was about $120. And so there were some good times when I was in high school, there was bonuses and trips, and I didn't really have a good grasp on money, and that it could run out, and that you had to worry about things like bills and credit card statements. So I had a really great childhood, and then unfortunately the Nortel stocks crashed just after I went to university, and my mom and my stepdad, who both worked there, had to find new roles. And I think that period, although it was probably the toughest financially for them, it taught me a lot about budgeting. And at that point, I had already been sent to collections for my $500 student credit card because, again, I did not really understand the concept of what a credit card was, as most students don't. And yeah, so I think, my university years, I definitely learned a lot about budgeting, about, running into tough financial situations and the ups and downs of finances throughout your life. And it was only really once I entered the working world that I got exposed to the world of startups and entrepreneurialism, and that I learned, you have to apply the budgeting lessons you learn in your personal life to your life as a business owner as well.
Absolutely. It definitely seems like if you want to go the startup route or the kind of entrepreneurial route, you do need to know how to kind of live the frugal life a little bit. I think a lot of people kind of forget that side of things. They probably just look at like Silicon Valley and be like, oh no, working for a startup means, you'll have to kind of work hard and, for little pay at the beginning, but then you're eventually going to be one of the, Snapchat kings or something like that.
Yeah, I think there's this big misconception around startups that number one, it's really easy to get funding because you see people like Snapchat and Uber raising hundreds of millions of dollars at billion-dollar valuations. And that also all startups become successful and that every startup ends with, people rolling around in buckets of money. And that's just not the case. The majority of startups, unfortunately, fail. And even the startups that are successful, it takes an average of 7 years to go from launch to a sale or an IPO or an acquisition. So realistically, you have several years of slogging it through and eating ramen noodles and really trying to save money before you ever get to a point where your company starts to take off and you're able to, make it big. And I think a perfect example of that is Airbnb. The founders of Airbnb in the first couple months, they actually created, it was during the election, John McCain versus Obama, and they created the Obama O's cereal and sold, I think, $100,000 worth. And that's how they actually financed Airbnb and were able to live while they were getting it off the ground. And I think, A, that shows the hustle, but B, it shows that, startups aren't successful from day one, and you often have to be really creative and also live on next to nothing in order to make them successful.
And there's always the, slight chance that you can kind of go in at the beginning and work really hard and put all those years in. And then it just, the startup just does not start up.
Well,
it's like,
exactly.
bye.
And I mean, the first startup, so I after I got out of journalism school, I worked at a PR agency for about a year. And then I was introduced to this really amazing female entrepreneur named Sarah Pravette. She's an awesome serial entrepreneur. And she was starting a company and wanted me to join her as the community manager. And I had no idea what I was doing, but kind of dove in. And that was my first kind of exposure to the startup world and exposed me to the idea that, you don't have these infinite resources like you do at a larger company. And you just have to kind of keep your head down, work really hard. And I mean, we went through really tough times where we had angel investment to start. And then we ended up running out of that. And, we all took pay cuts. So I always joke that I was making less at the end of my time at that company than I was at the beginning. And yeah, so I think there's lots of ups and downs to startups, but yeah, it was a really valuable experience for me, at least, getting into the startup world and learning that there's this whole entrepreneurial world that allows you to take control of your destiny.
So what are some of the key things that you learned working for a startup? Because I've never worked at a startup myself. I've always kind of done the corporate thing. So I'm very interested in what kind of things do you learn that maybe you wouldn't get out of just working a normal kind of traditional company?
For sure. I mean, I think you definitely learn the idea of resourcefulness. So when I joined my first startup, it was just Sarah, who is the CEO, Grant, who is our full-time developer, and then myself. So, in a big organization, you have kind of this very defined role where you're doing marketing, but you're doing this very specific function of marketing, and you are at X seniority level. And so your job description includes these 5 things. And until you earn the right to be at the next level, you're only allowed to do those 5 things. I think startups are very different in that, number one, there's nobody else above or below you in many cases, especially at an early stage startup. So you get exposed to a lot of things that are really above your pay grade and your experience level. And number two, I mean, you just have to do things that are outside of your level of experience. So for example, I was a journalism grad. I had experience with marketing and PR, but I was often doing things like sales and business development and partnerships and event planning and things that I had just never done before. So I find one of the benefits of startups is that even though you have limited resources and that you don't have the budgets of a big company, you can really punch above your weight and you can get so much experience combined into a much shorter period of time.
Absolutely. Totally agree. So you said that you studied journalism, but now your career is more the PR digital media side. How did you kind of get into that? It seems like kind of a big leap from journalism.
Yeah, so it's funny. My dad and my mom are both journalism grads, so it kind of runs in the family. And my dad, as I mentioned, was a longtime community newspaper reporter, and my mom went into marketing. And and I think, number one, there's a lot more money in marketing than there is in journalism. So it was definitely funny. I mean, we are on a financial podcast, so I have to say that part of it was financially motivated. But it was also that I knew journalism, after talking to my parents about their experience, I knew that journalism taught you, how to be a great writer, how to write succinctly and clearly, how to interview people and interact with people and just kind of taught you how to be a great communicator. And I knew that that would be applicable to, marketing or whatever I ended up going into. And it was only in my fourth year that I took a public relations course and kind of fell in love with that and decided to pursue that after I graduated. But, I think looking at the journalism and the media landscape now, it was almost, prescient that I knew that I wanted to go into marketing. And a lot of people who, raised their hand and said, I want to be a hardcore journalist when I graduate, a lot of them are now working in marketing because it's just not the same landscape that it was 20, 30 years ago. So
it's true.
At least it has stood me in good stead. And I actually spent 3 years running a startup publication called Beta Kit. So I have kind of dabbled in the journalism space and I absolutely love it. But I think there's definitely a lot more opportunity on the marketing side right now. For better or for
Absolutely.
worse.
And as the same way, I thought I was going to be a filmmaker and I work in marketing now. So, but I feel like, kind of like you said, there's just because you don't necessarily do the exact thing that you went to school for, like journalism or filmmaking or whatever, you can still kind of dabble in those things if you were to go in a different career, especially marketing, because it can kind of be pretty malleable and flexible as what I found in my career.
Well, and think about, being a filmmaker is really all about being a storyteller. And I think that's really what you do in marketing. So although you're not doing that, I'm sure, in marketing, there's a lot of opportunities for creating videos and doing really awesome, storytelling. So you're still a filmmaker in some respects.
Exactly. That's what I'd like to think. So after working for that startup, out of university, then you started working at 88 Creative, which you are now the managing director of.
Yes, it's a very fancy title that I gave myself.
It sounds super fancy.
That's another thing about startups is that you can pretty much give yourself whatever title you want. So I was like, what makes me sound the absolute most fanciest that I could possibly sound? And I came up with managing director.
Yeah, it sounds good. You picked a good one.
Thank you. I think president was a little bit too fancy, so I went one step down.
Yeah. Of course. So what do you kind of do there as managing director?
So other than make up fancy titles for myself, when I joined 88 Creative, it was kind of a 4-person social media agency. And I came in and was tasked with building the brand of 88 Creative since nobody really knew about it. And expanding the scope of services and then also just building the client base. So I joined 3 years ago. And since then, we've grown from 4 people to 11 people. We've added a public relations division and a graphic design practice. And we've really expanded our client base. We used to be almost exclusively real estate. And now I would say we focus mostly on consumer technology. So, apps that you probably use on your phone or e-commerce companies. And then we do a lot of lifestyle and consumer. So we work with a pet food brand and beauty products. And we now offer, PR, graphic design, digital marketing. And it's really grown in the last few years. So my role is really just to, raise the profile of the company through speaking engagements and the media appearances that I do and really fun self-promo campaigns. We did one last summer called Agency or Porn, which is really fun. It asks you to choose whether the name of something is an adult film or an advertising agency. So that was a fun one, although my senior designer has some questionable search history now.
I bet.
And I do a lot of the new business development. So, working with any inquiries that come in, sourcing new business opportunities, working on proposals. And then I do a lot of client work. I think if you are really an entrepreneurial person, you don't want to be the person that just sits in a boardroom and stares at Excel spreadsheets. You want to be the person who's still scribbling on the napkin and who's still getting their hands dirty. So for me, I love still working on a lot of the startup and technology clients and working on their digital marketing and their PR strategies. And so I think it's fun to, sit and have that 10,000 foot view of managing the people in the company and managing the growth strategy, but then also kind of getting down into the weeds and working on, making your clients successful.
Absolutely. So, it seems like a big part of your job is obviously raising the profile of 88 Creative, but you've also really done a great job of raising your profile as Erin Bury. Like when I was Googling you, I'm like, damn, you got some good results going on there. So how did you, because I know a big thing, and this is what you spoke about at the conference last year, was about personal branding, which I agree is so important no matter kind of what you do, if you're an entrepreneur or if you just want to do a career, but you want to kind of progress in the career and get known in your field. How did you, because for instance, you write for the Financial Post, you've also been quoted in some huge publications like Forbes, and then you also got Marketing Magazine's 30 Under 30. How did you accomplish all of these things? What would you kind of say helped you get to this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. And I love talking about personal branding because I do think it's super important. And if you had asked me, when I was first starting out at the startup right out of school, I wouldn't have even known what it was or thought that it was important. And it was really kind of an accident that I started to build my profile. When you're at a startup, when you're the marketing department, you're so synonymous with the company. It's not like when you're one of 100 marketing people working for a big multinational corporation. I was, the only person doing marketing for this startup. I was running community events and attending events and writing blog posts. And I kind of became the face of this company. And so when people would follow the company on social media, they would also follow me by extension. So it was just kind of this accidental thing that I started to grow my online presence. And I started, just as part of our marketing strategy, giving talks to entrepreneurs about how to leverage social media and started writing submitted posts for media outlets. And I saw, every time I did something like that, the membership on our social network would jump. And, I realized that a personal brand is a great tool for you as a person trying to get more exposure, but it's also a really powerful tool for growing your business. And I think that's something that, when you're at a startup, you have to use everything in your toolkit to raise the profile. So personal brands are imperative to growing that profile. And when you look at the most successful startups, like, Virgin, although it's not a startup now, Richard Branson is the face of it. And Jack Dorsey is the face of Square and Twitter. And so most entrepreneurs understand the power of a personal brand, and they put a lot of effort into forming that. Whereas when you're working at a larger company, you're not always encouraged to build that individual profile. It's more so about raising the profile of the company. So once I started to understand the power of it, I really started to proactively go after those things like speaking engagements and, media opportunities. And I think, a lot of people say, well, how did you get 30 under 30? To be honest, I nominated myself. And
you did.
Yeah, I did. And, in terms of getting, financial post opportunities or media opportunities, I just write to the editors and ask them. And you'd be surprised at how open people are to having you speak at their event or having you submit something in your area of expertise. And I think the biggest challenge with a personal brand is figuring out what is your niche. For me, it was, being a woman in technology has been a big one, or just being a thought leader on startups and the startup space in Canada. But, everyone's niche is different, and also figuring out what's a unique take on that niche. Is there somebody already doing it? You can't be the next Gail Vaz-Oxlade if you want to talk about personal finance. So what's your approach to it, and how are you going to be different? Because if you're emailing the finance editor at the Globe and Mail and pitching them that you're the next Gail Vaz-Oxlade, you're probably not going to be as successful as if you email them with a really unique take.
Absolutely. And this is something that I am so obsessed with personal branding, especially the past couple of years as I've switched careers from kind of a more sales advertising to more digital marketing, just because I feel like everyone, no matter where they are, they can, take, some of this advice. If it just means yes, they just always want to work for a company, fine. But and even part of my job is showing some of the people that I work with, what you should have on your LinkedIn page, how to be more searchable. And this is things, if you do want to eventually, get promoted or, just move forward in your career, you need to, it needs to be clear to whoever your boss is, or maybe potential people that, or, companies that you want to work with, who you are, what you can do, what you're an expert in. So I think that's, pretty valuable.
It's true. And I think a lot of people think that personal brand just means, oh, I want to be famous, but I don't think that that's what it is. Having a strong personal brand is valuable if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to sell to someone. If I Google you, am I able to find you? Do I trust you? Do I think that you're legitimate? It's great. If you're looking for a new job, or if you're trying to get a promotion within your company, there are so many reasons to be Googleable and to have a really strong, especially a strong online brand these days. But it's funny. I think I work with most of the team members at 88 Creative are a lot younger, and I'm always, I feel like they're nagging grandma that's like, build your personal brand, you'll thank me later. And, it's kind of like pulling teeth sometimes to get them to go to industry events and get them to submit articles to industry publications. But I think, once they speak at an event once, or they see an article of theirs published, they really start to understand the value of it. And it's kind of addictive. Once you start building your personal brand, it's hard to stop. And you've done a great job with it too. I've seen.
Oh, well, I've taken some of your advice. So
well, there you go. There's the Canadian Personal Finance Conference helping everyone out.
It really did. You inspired a lot of people.
Just like Oprah.
Just like Oprah. Also, okay, what I love is when I do search you several times, it'll be like your claim to fame is that Oprah tweeted you twice, not once, but twice. Can you tell me, what did she retweet you? Like, what were you tweeting about that she like loved?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I have to start by saying that I think I need to let that claim to fame go, because it was so long ago that now I feel like
I don't know. I was like,
it happened. Okay, it happened, but
it happened. Like, there's a big deal.
I know. So it was when OWN was launching, her network was launching in Canada, and I tweeted kind of this cheeky, almost making fun of her tweet. If you know Oprah, she loves giving things away, and she's like, everybody gets cars. So I tweeted, OWN launches in Canada today. Everybody gets OWN. And then she retweeted it, but she removed the part where I kind of made fun of her. And then she tweeted about a show that was launching and added my name to the end of it, as if I was like this super cool person that had to know about this show launch. So that's when I assumed that we were BFFs. And being the entrepreneurial hustler that I was, I actually emailed her own team and said they should hire me to run OWN Canada. But unfortunately, I never heard back.
You know what? Never hurts to ask.
That's the worst they can say is no. Another thing you learn in startups, the worst someone can say is no. So you always got to try.
Yeah, exactly. If someone says no, try someone else or try again.
Exactly.
No, that's exactly like my husband's a freelancer, so he's an entrepreneur, and yeah, we have these conversations all the time where, he's like, oh, I'm thinking about doing this, kind of different thing. Should I? I'm afraid to fail. I'm afraid if someone says no. It's like, or if, he thought a client was going to come through and, he sees on like Facebook, oh no, I guess they went with someone else. It's like, you know what? Move on to the next one. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. And I mean, my boyfriend always laughs at me because he says, Monday will be the best day of my working life and Tuesday is the worst day. I mean, it's just the ups and downs of being a small business owner or being in any business, to be honest. I mean, even if you work for a larger company, one day your project was successful and you got an amazing email from your boss. And the next day, for me, for example, like a client will leave or something will fall through or someone will go with another agency or, there's just so many ups and downs. And I think it's inevitable when you're a small business owner. And so I totally empathize with him in that struggle.
I know. It sucks. It is a struggle. The struggle's real.
Yeah.
Since, you do, you're young, but you've, experienced quite a lot, especially when it comes to, having a successful career. What kind of tidbits of advice would you offer to, say, someone kind of starting out and they're not maybe sure what path they want to go to, but they definitely have a lot of ambition. They just don't really know where to start.
Well, I think definitely the number one piece of advice I give people is around personal branding. I think, a lot of applicants that we get, I can't find them online. They don't have a portfolio, and they don't stand out versus some of their peers who are sending in these really amazing Squarespace websites and, samples of writing that they've done and really strong social media profiles. So I think, especially for people graduating and trying to get a job, you have to stand out by having a really strong online presence, especially if you're applying for a job in marketing or journalism or something like that. And then second of all, I would say, and maybe this is just a tip for job applicants, but we get a lot of job applications at 88 Creative. And I can't tell you how many of them say, "Dear sir or madam, I would like to work at your agency. It sounds great. Sincerely, me." And they're just form emails and they're not well thought out or well researched. And I think, any person that we've hired at 88 Creative, any intern that we've brought on or co-op student, it's always been from a really thought out, meaningful interaction. I researched you guys. I saw your agency or porn campaign last summer. It was super funny. I really like the work that you did for client X. Here's why I'd be an amazing fit. Here's a link to some of the work that I've done. I hope that you can take the time to chat. So I find that the people who, put a little bit of thought and effort into their application always stand out. So that's just in terms of job seeking. And then I would say, try to find a mentor. I think that's really, everyone says find a mentor. But for me, I was lucky because my mentor was Sarah, the entrepreneur who I worked for several years. But it really just helped to have someone I could talk to about where I wanted to go in my career and the skills that I was lacking. And I actually joined a program called Mentor Exchange recently and was paired up with the VP of marketing at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, who manages 150 people and manages all of these marketing programs. And she's I look at her and I'm like, oh my God, you're so successful, and she's super helpful. And So for me, it's either find a formal mentorship opportunity through a program like that, or find an informal mentor through a program like 10,000 Coffees, or just someone that you've met in, at a networking event. But if you can have someone that you can kind of bounce ideas off, someone that has a little bit more experience than you, that can help you navigate as you go through the first years of your career, I think it'll kind of help you avoid some of the mistakes that everybody inevitably makes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thanks for suggesting those things, because early in my career, I was also lucky that, my first boss was definitely kind of my unofficial mentor. I worked at the company for 3 years, and I definitely learned a lot from her just because she was, a tough cookie. But as far as like a formal, like how do I actually find a formal mentor? I didn't actually know lots of those things existed. So that's good to know that those things, are available to people.
Yeah. And I think, one other thing I'll say about startups and entrepreneurialism is there's this real idea of paying it forward. Every entrepreneur who has a successful exit with their company, I always thought, okay, so you sell your company for $20 million. That means you go retire on a beach in the Bahamas and drink mojitos every day. But entrepreneurs aren't like that. True entrepreneurs take that money and they, number one, start another company, and number two, invest that money in the next generation of entrepreneurs. And they're also really focused on mentorship and mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs. So startups really taught me that not only should you seek out a mentor, but once you get to a point in your career where you've had a modicum of success like you have or I have, we should also be offering that to the next generation. So for example, I do weekly office hours where I meet with anyone and everyone who wants to pick my brain about marketing or career advice. And we do it as well on an 88 Creative level, where every month we invite students or other agencies to come in and just chat about, whatever we want, whatever they want. So always something to think about.
That's awesome. So now that you've already reached this 30 under 30, what do you see next for the next chapter of your career? 40 under 40?
Definitely 40 under 40. The 30 under 30 thing is great, but now that I'm 31, it's kind of expired. I know you recently turned the big 3-0. I really loved your post about 30 lessons, and it was a painful one to swallow, but
I know.
Yeah,
it really was. Still not over it.
I know. Well, 31 actually, I've passed it, and
it gets
okay.
better.
Yeah, it feels fine. Yeah. But I think it's so hard. In every job interview you go to, they ask, what's your 5-year plan, or where do you see yourself in 10 years? And I think the difference between the generation before us and us is that we don't know the answer to that question. I love 88 Creative. It's my life. I'm super devoted to it, but I have no idea, what I'll be doing in 5 years, but I do know that it will be entrepreneurial, and that I will continue to build my personal brand, and that it will be something that involves startups and technology. So I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'll be Oprah's BFF for real. I'll just replace Gail, and you'll see me on TV.
Oh, you could just be the next Oprah. How about that?
I like that idea. I really have to practice my I'm giving away 500 cars voice, though.
That's true. You'll have to work on that, but
I will.
You've got
time. I definitely have time.
Well, thank you, Erin, for chatting with me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I am very honored to be on the show, and congrats to you on all of your success as well, because I think, you've done a really incredible job showing the world that we millennials are not lazy, entitled losers, and we actually have a lot to say.
We are not entitled lazy losers. That's the best quote ever. And that was episode 70 of the Mo Money podcast with the awesome Erin Bury. Learn more about her at erinbury.com, or check out the show notes for this episode at jessicamorehouse.com/70. I will put a lot of good stuff, tidbits about her and everything we talked about in this episode in the show notes, so make sure to check them out. And of course, a big thank you to today's episode sponsor, Just Wealth. Just Wealth is Canada's most comprehensive online investment platform. Make sure to take advantage of the $50 bonus you will get when you sign up with them if you go to justwealth.com/Jessica-Morehouse. I will put that link in the show notes so you don't forget, jessicamorehouse.com/70, and take advantage. Just Wealth, investing the way it should be, just for you. So thank you for listening, and make sure to check out tomorrow's episode, because yes, that's right. Tomorrow's Thursday. I've got another Listener Series episode.